Hey guys, Kevin again for The Flash, Season 1, Episode 7, Guerrilla Warfare. And I was definitely really looking forward to this episode. After the amazing episode last week and the amazing cliffhanger as well, I knew this episode was going to be here. But also, this was the return of Gorilla Grodd, who, of course, we all remember how awesome the last Gorilla Grodd episode was. And this did not disappoint at all. In fact, I think this episode was just as strong as last week's. This is a tie for best episode of the season, this one and this one. They both were amazing episodes, and it was awesome to see Grodd return in this episode. There's so much to love about it. There's a lot that happened in this episode, and I really love the way they're setting up Legends of Tomorrow. Like, you really see that. In fact, the next episode is going to be the crossover between Arrow, Flash, and Legends of Tomorrow. That is the next episode. However, the Flash is taking a break next week, so there won't be any reviews for the Flash or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There will be Scream Queens, though, which I will review that. But let's review that. So basically, let's just get into this episode. We start off right away with Barry being helped to walk. He now has a cane, and it was interesting to see the Flash weakened. I mean, this entire episode, Barry's kind of off doing his own thing because he's just very weak. I mean, Zoom really did weaken him, and I kind of thought this wasn't going to be as effective as it was. I thought he was going to be, full recovery like that. No, I like seeing Barry have to suffer. Him having to go through this recovery is one of the most interesting things about this episode. At Star Labs, the team says that Barry's almost healed. They want to help him, and he's still having trouble breathing, though, and he can barely walk. Even though he's healed, he can barely walk, and he's not what he used to be. So, he really wants someone to help him out. So Wells then comes in and asks them to help him head back to Earth 2 to try to stop Zoom, and everyone thinks it's a great idea except for Caitlin. She thinks that, he should stay there to help them. Now that Jay left, they need someone, who's going to help them, and someone who is, aware of what's going on in Earth 2, because obviously, like I said, Jay left, and he's the only one left, so Caitlin just doesn't think it's a good idea at all, and they agree to not do that, which I thought was interesting. I guess Caitlin makes all the major decisions now interesting, but, one of the things that's most interesting about this episode is that I like seeing Star Labs have to work without Barry. I mean, Barry in this episode really can't do much, because like I said, he's healing for most of the episode. It was very interesting to watch, and I really loved it. So Cisco gets an alert, but it's not something urgent. It's about his date with Kendra. And like I predicted, Kendra is going to be his love interest. Now, Kendra is going to be a character on Legends of Tomorrow, a major character. Hawkgirl, one of the only characters we haven't seen yet, and I like the way we're starting it up. So Barry gets a phone call, So basically, Barry gets a phone call from Patty and takes it, and he's basically told her that he's sick, but she obviously doesn't know the details, and she offers to bring him soup, at which he declines. She's very suspicious, but lets him go, and again, I like how smart Patty is becoming. You can tell she really does not believe this story. It doesn't sound very true to her, and she's just not believing it. So Caitlin goes to talk to Wells, and he's at a bar preparing to leave, scribbling notes, and she tells him that they can help him save Jesse, but he says he made a mistake coming to Earth 1, that he doesn't have another plan. And Caitlin tells him that the best way to save Jesse is to just stay. He needs to stay, and he tells her to leave him alone and that he needs to figure out which breach to use, and he gets the idea that he has to close all of the breaches except the one at Star Labs, which is very interesting. The way he wanted to use these breaches, I thought I definitely really like seeing. Because remember, we found out last week that Wells just really wants to save his daughter. That's what his main thing is here. But I like that Caitlin's telling him, look, you want to save your daughter, you got to stay here. And I love seeing that. So he wants to close all the breaches except the one at Star Labs so that way he can somehow get back. So before their date can start, it's going along well, Cisco and Kendra's date. They're talking, and by the way, they had very good chemistry in this episode. Like, I could definitely see these two dating in the future. The sad thing is Cisco's not going to be on Legend of Tomorrow that much. However, if these two date, that could be very interesting. I feel like they're going to date maybe before Legend of Tomorrow or something. I don't know. I mean, she's going to be on the next episode as well, so I guess we'll really have to see what happens there. But basically, Cisco then touches Caitlin's hand. He gets a vibe of her seeing Hawkgirl, and he tells her that he has to go. And obviously, he doesn't know what any of this means. He doesn't know who Hawkgirl is. He doesn't know any of this, and I really like seeing Cisco have to deal with that. So at the research lab, a scientist has a brief, strange vision and starts to excuse himself, and on the way out, he shatters a glass case, steals a canister, uses it to knock down another man, tries to stop him. Outside, he meets Grodd, who had been controlling him, and that was just awesome. So that, the introduction that Grodd had in this episode was so badass. I honestly can't think of a better way to reintroduce Grodd to the story. Just show that he still has the mind control, he's still powerful, maybe even more powerful than he was before. It was awesome to watch, and I loved everything they did with Grodd in this episode. He truly was a badass, I have to say. Honestly, seeing Grodd was awesome. So the next morning, Joe and Patty meet at the crime scene where they seek evidence that the scientist was killed by a metahuman. And of course, Patty doesn't really know what's going on with Grodd. And Joe knows right away what's going on with Barry. I mean, you really see that concern that Joe has for Barry. Once Patty's telling him that it's a gorilla, he's like, oh shit, Grodd's back. So he excuses himself to check on Barry, saying that Barry wanted to bring hot soup. And at Star Labs, Barry's on the treadmill. When he starts to push himself, he gets flashbacks to Zoom's attacks, and he loses his balance, and Joe's freaking out, telling him that Grodd is there. And then we get this great scene between Joe and Barry, which I love. I mean, again, some of the best scenes in the show are scenes between Joe and Barry. I could say it a million times, but that's true. He loses balance and is thrown from the treadmill, and we get this great scene with Barry and Joe. He talks about how he really feels like a failure because Zoom beat him in front of the whole city. Everyone saw it. This wasn't just a small, secluded fight that Barry and Zoom had in a building. No, he thinks that Zoom wanted to humiliate him. He thinks that Zoom wanted to weaken him because now everyone doesn't have faith in the Flash. And I like how Joe tells him that he can have the faith again and that he needs to start it up again. It was a really powerful scene. I definitely really love seeing that. I thought they did a very good job with that scene. Just a really great scene between Joe and Barry. Some of my favorite stuff in the show, of course, are scenes between Joe and Barry. But I just love the scene here. You really get those Wells flashbacks. So when Barry really thought he couldn't defeat Wells, Zoom is another beast altogether. I mean, he's even worse than Wells, because the thing with Zoom is that he's willing to weaken Barry. He's willing to humiliate him, and he's willing to make him feel like shit. Wells did this, but Zoom's already doing this, so who knows what else Zoom has planned for Barry. That's really what I think. I know people are saying, oh, Zoom's not a very good villain. Again, we barely have a chance to see Zoom. We know that Zoom obviously wants to be the only speedster left, but what else does he want to do? What is his initial plan? How does he plan to do this? We don't really know, and I like that because it really keeps us wanting to know more, and I think it's really well done the way they're handling that. So in the Star Breach room, Cisco tells Caitlin that he vibed on a Birdman, and she's thinking that he's crazy. She thinks it's ridiculous. Then he starts saying it might be an angel, and Caitlin then gets the same vision that the scientist had before. She punches Cisco and then leaves. It's actually pretty funny, but obviously we know she's under Grodd's mind control. We know that's what's going on here. So Patty calls Joe to tell him that first of all, the drugs are stolen or used to enhance intelligence, among other things, and second, that hairs found at the crime scene are gorilla hairs, and that's when Joe, like I said, freaks out. He comes see Barry and Caitlin, telling him that Grodd's back, and just as Caitlin heads outside, they see on the security camera that she's being followed by Grodd, but neither are present when they get outside. Obviously, they don't know where she went, so they're freaking out because, one, Grodd's back, two, they know that he's controlling Caitlin, so they don't know really what's going to happen here. Obviously, it's not a very good situation at all, really. It's really not. So at Star Labs, Joe says he's going to look for information on Gorilla's sightings so they can track him to use to rescue Caitlin, but who they think has been abducted. They think she's been kidnapped. And when Cisco and Wells start to go to work, Joe leaves Barry to try and figure out how they're going to subdue Grodd once they find him. Because obviously they know how powerful he is. They know what he can do. They need to find a way to weaken him so he can't do what he usually does. And in a new lair, not his one from the sewers, he has a new lair here. Caitlin wakes up and Grodd calls her name. She realizes that he remembers her, and he leaps down to stand near her. And he says that she was always kind and that he needs help. And it's interesting what Grodd needs in this episode. He's not back to kill Barry. That's not why he's back. He needs help. He wants to know how he became what he is. He wants her to repeat the action that created him so that there can be more like him. And when she says she can, he tells her to learn. And you really actually felt for Grodd in this episode. I mean, Grodd really doesn't understand what he's capable of. He doesn't understand why he's doing these things. And that's really interesting. If they take this in the direction of Grodd not really understanding what he's doing, I mean, I'm sure Grodd's fully aware of what he's doing, but he doesn't understand how he became what he is, and I think it's definitely very interesting. Basically, he wants her to recreate the day that he got turned into this metahuman, and she's saying that she can't do that, and he tells her to learn, and it's very interesting. So back at Star Labs, Barry is on the treadmill, but it turns it off when he starts to get speed lightning. And then Henry shows up to talk to him. Yes, Henry is back in this episode, which was awesome. The season is seriously lacking Henry, I do have to say that. And I like that Iris was the one that came up with this idea. And again, it really shows how smart Iris is. I've said it before, but Iris is very smart when it comes to this stuff. She really knows what's going to help out Barry. So after explaining Grodd's origin to Wells, Cisco asks what Wells is doing, and Wells says he has an algorithm that can find Grodd, and it gets a hit. So I really like seeing Cisco and Wells working together. I mean, it's one of my favorite parts of this season. It's really well done to see, and it's a real turnaround from last season. I mean, last season we were so used to Wells working with Barry, while now it's more Wells working with Cisco because Wells is just a scientist, and I love seeing that. I think it's really great the way they did that. So Henry gives Barry this really motivational speech. He talks about how when he was away, he, wanted to talk to him and everything. It's a really powerful speech, what he says to him. Like he has to be the one to get courage again, and he has to be the one to help himself out. It's a really, really nice speech. I really loved it, and it's great to see that Henry was back with Barry, and Cisco comes, says they know where Grodd is, and we find out that Henry also went on a little camping trip without Barry, which Barry obviously was upset about. That's probably something that they always want to do together, and I love the scene where Henry talks about how he had to live in this prison. He was planning on living there for life, when he killed his wife and everything, people thinking he killed his wife, he had to do he had to look at his son, and just, they didn't know that he wasn't the one that did it, obviously. He had to live with that, and now Barry has to deal with this. If he can deal with that, Barry can deal with this, and I really do agree with Henry. I mean, they're two very different situations, but they're very much the same way. Henry was being portrayed in this terrible way, and Barry's afraid of being humiliated. They're very much the same kind of circumstance, and I think it's overall really interesting the way that Henry used that to motivate Barry. I really love that. So Cisco comes and says they know where Grodd is. Barry still doesn't know how they're going to get Caitlin back, but because obviously he can't be the Flash right now. He can't do this. Keep in mind that. That's something I love, is that he can't be like the Flash in this episode. But Wells has an idea, which is very, very smart, and this was awesome. He's going to dress as a Reverse Flash, and they hope he can convince Grodd that he's the real deal and talk him into letting her go. Basically pretend to be, his creator, and seeing Wells back into that, Eobard Thawne persona was so awesome. I love seeing it. However, I love that Wells didn't really know what he was doing. I thought it was very funny. But it would make sense because obviously Wells never met Reverse Flash before, so he obviously didn't know really what he was doing. But as Cisco and Wells hung on the third and found potential Grodd location, Wells rehearses sounding like the other Wells, and it's a pretty fun scene. I really enjoyed seeing them improvise like that. And especially, of course, the line, "Cisco, you've shown me what it's like to have a son." I mean, that gets me every time. The second he said that, I'm like, oh shit, we know what happened. I mean, that really got that really made me excited, and I love that scene. Really, really good stuff, and obviously, it's amazing stuff, really. It's great to see Tom, I always forget his name, Tom Cavanaugh, back into that role, obviously. Obviously, he's not back into that role, but it was cool to see him channel the other Wells again. He'll always have that, and I love that. So, at Starlabs, Henry tells Barry that everyone stopped believing in him when he was convicted of his wife's murder, that he knows what it's like to have those judgmental eyes on you, and Barry asks him how he got past that, and Henry says he embraced it, and that accepting it was the only way to move forward. If he could survive it and learn to believe in himself again, he could do anything. He says Barry helps him by never doubting him. Just a really great scene. I loved all the scenes between Henry and Barry in this episode. I hope we have more of them. I know that Henry obviously is out of prison, so I hope we see more of this. I really hope that works out. So, I know people are upset, obviously, that we haven't seen a lot of Henry. Again, I think it has made sense because you didn't want to distract Barry. I can understand that. But I think Henry's realizing that he kind of needs it. Barry kind of needs his motivational speech, and I really like seeing that. And at Grodd's lair, Caitlin has a working theory on how to make more like Grodd, but before she can try to implement it, Wells enters and tells Grodd that he's back and that they don't need Caitlin anymore. He tells Grodd to let her go, and it's a really interesting scene here, the way he did this. I mean, you can tell that he is definitely trying to be like Wells. Grodd says that Wells never asked for anything, just took, and demands to know who Wells is. He knows this is not Wells. He throws Wells against the wall. Barry tells Cisco who had to run to rescue Caitlin that an overdose of the drugs Grodd stole could overload his brain and provide them cover for an escape. So Wells stands up, taking a more aggressive tone of voice, manages to fool Grodd into believing he's Wells, and after delivering a monologue that sounds suspiciously like something Wells would say, he sticks Grodd with a handful of needles and flees with Cisco and Caitlin. Now, I don't think that's trying to say that this could be the Earth One Wells. Obviously, we know he's dead, but the way he was able to do that was a bit too good. I mean, he definitely seemed like he was the real Wells. I know that was the plan, but it seemed like he was right back into that role when obviously this isn't the real Wells. So I thought that was very interesting the way we saw that. And the way that he did that with Grodd, I really loved seeing. The way he just kind of made him think that he was Earth One Wells was really great stuff, and I really love seeing that. But it does lead us to believe, I mean, is this Wells sincere with what he wants to do, or does he have a bigger plan that we don't know about? I mean, I feel like he wants to help his daughter, but I feel like there's something more that we're just not getting, and I really like that. So back at Star Labs, Caitlin patches up Wells. Joe suggests killing Grodd, but Caitlin objects, saying that he's lonely and sad, and I really do agree with Caitlin that Grodd is not a bad guy by any means. You know, he had a master, and now now that his master is dead, his creator is dead, he really doesn't know what to do. You know, even though he knows his creator is alive now, he still really doesn't know what to do. He's all alone. He doesn't really have a mission. So Wallace says he has located a breach that will send Grodd to a suitable location on Earth 2, and Henry volunteers Barry to bait Grodd into the breach. And basically, Caitlin lures Grodd out of his lair, and Barry in the Flash outfit lures him in front of the breach. Once there, the plan is to blast Grodd into Earth 2 with a speed cannon. Barry shows up chased by Grodd. Cisco and Wallace turn on the speed cannon. When Grodd hits Barry, he has a flashback to his beating by Zoom, but he recovers when Caitlin provides cover. It's very interesting the way he's having these flashbacks, and Caitlin provides cover. She tells Grodd that Flash are just trying to save her from Grodd and isn't an enemy, and she tells Grodd she can give him what he wants if he trusts her, and this scene was really great. I really loved it. I like how they're setting up Grodd as a genuine vulnerable character and not just some villain. I like the way they're doing that. So Grodd approaches her, Barry runs her, dragging Caitlin away while the breach opens up and starts dragging Grodd. He's resisting though, and Henry has to encourage Barry to kick Grodd into the speed can, sending the ape to Earth 2, and that was awesome. I loved seeing that. So then we see back at Star Labs that Cisco plans on destroying the Reverse Flash suit, but Barry asks him to find how it makes it compress into the ring first, obviously. Because, you know, they never know when they'll need it again, so Wells says he can help as he can understand microtechnology, and he tells them about the Gorilla Preserve where they sent Grodd and says he's going to stay and work with Team Flash to close the breaches and rescue his daughter. So I like seeing that he's going to work with them. I think it's really great, and it seems like they really have established a team here, which I like seeing. So back at home, Henry takes a number of childhood photos of Barry, but before he leaves town again, it's sad to see him leave, but, you know, he's not a main character, so he's going to leave every now and again. I really am hoping, though, I do have to say, guys, I'm really hoping that, at least by the end of the season, that Henry is with Barry, because I honestly would like them to make him a main character. I know that we have Joe already, but just the motivational speeches with Henry, we don't get a lot of. That's why they're all so great, because we don't get a lot of them. They always utilize him very well, and I'd like to see more of him. Really, their bonding is just great. I love it. So Joe tells Barry that Patty isn't dumb and really isn't buying a story about being sick, and Barry says he'll tell Henry about the new girl on the way to the bus station. Obviously, Henry now knows that Barry is a girlfriend, and after Barry and Henry leave, Joe muses about what it would be like to have a son, something that tortures Iris a little bit since she knows that he has one. And, obviously, this is a secret that Iris has to keep because she knows he has Wally West, obviously. But he doesn't know about Wally West yet. Now, Wally West, I hear, is not going to be introduced till, I think, the mid-season finale is when they're introducing him. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like that's when they're introducing him. Since we have 2 episodes left for this half of the season, I really feel like that would make sense. Because if Iris is to come face-to-face with Wally in that episode, that's going to make things even more awkward for Joe. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with that. Because, obviously, Joe knows what it is like to have a son. He just didn't know that Wally's alive. So when he finds out that Wally's alive, that's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do there. So at Barry's lab, Patty confronts him about his lies about being sick. She asks why he lied to her, and he says his dad was in town, that he didn't tell her because he was convicted of murder. He apologized for not having more faith in her, but she says it's not about Henry, it's about Barry, and she needs to trust him that the relationship is going to work, and they kiss, and I like that they're not yelling at each other. I like that they're having a mature conversation. I like that they're trying to make things work, and I think it's really great. Do I think that Patty's about to find out about Barry? Oh, yeah, she's going to find out very soon. I don't know when, but very soon Patty is going to find out about Barry. I mean, if Linda knows, anyone can know. That's really what it comes down to. If Linda can find out, Patty can find out it too, and I'm definitely interested in seeing what's going to happen with that. So that night, after Jitters closes, Cisco brings Kendra a basket with chocolate and flowers to apologize for bailing on their date. It's actually a really sweet scene. He tells her that there was a police emergency. She says that working with them is very cool and brave. He's brought a digital movie projector with the Princess Bride on it so they can resume their dates. And Kendra reaches out to hold his hand. He gets a much closer vision of Hawkgirl. Now realizing it's Kendra, he reacts to it and covers by telling her she's a great kisser. The two leave to watch The Princess Bride. This is going to be very interesting to see how Cisco handles this Hawkgirl situation. What is he going to say to Barry? We'll have to see. I mean, obviously, again, we know the next episode is all about Legends of Tomorrow, if you guys didn't know that. That's what the whole Flash Arrow crossover is about this year. It's about getting all these characters to Legends of Tomorrow, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they do that. But basically, I think Cisco wants to maintain a relationship with Kendra, but I think he knows that he just can't because obviously she's Hawkgirl and she doesn't know anything that's going on with her. So on Earth 2, Grodd is spit out into a jungle. Now, the end of this episode, I really love setting up with Grodd. He's spit out into a jungle. He sniffs and looks around. He sees a rock formation that looks like a gorilla with a city beneath it and roars. And this is basically setting up Gorilla City, which is pretty much where Grodd's going to find his place. And I think it's really interesting the way they did that. Making this episode a lot less about just Grodd as a villain and making it more about Grodd trying to find his place is really compelling. And I really want them to follow up on this. Grodd is a very interesting character. I didn't realize how interesting of a character it really was till this episode. But yeah, he really is a great character. And I think they really set up everything with Grodd very, very well in this episode. And I really like the direction they're heading with his storyline. It's just going to be very interesting to see what they do with this all. I mean, definitely I'm interested in that. So as far as that goes, that's going to be extremely interesting. I can't wait to see what they do with this Gorilla City, obviously. Is he going to find his place? We'll have to see. Let's talk about Kendra. How is Cisco going to handle this? Obviously, he knows that Kendra's Hawkgirl. How is he going to do this? I mean, obviously, I think he really does want to be with Kendra, but he knows that she's Hawkgirl, and he knows that he has to tell Barry, most likely. So we'll have to see how he handles this. I'm not really sure if he's going to handle this rationally. He's probably going to freak out or something. I'm not really sure. We'll have to see what happens with that. Okay, let's talk about Wells and the Reverse Flash suit. Okay, I'm not saying that Wells is obviously, Eobard Thawne. That's obviously not what I'm saying. But is there a bigger plan that Wells has that we don't know about? I mean, just the way he was talking just seemed a bit suspicious. It seemed too easy to be, it seemed like it was too much, honestly. Like, it seemed like he really knew, like, what he was doing, definitely. It was very interesting to see it's going to be very interesting to see what's going to happen with that. Definitely, I'm looking forward to seeing really if he is sincere. I think he's sincere, but at this point, you don't really know. We'll have to see. Barry and Patty. Patty, like I said, is very close to finding out. I don't know when, but she's going to find out very, very soon. Now, when, again, I don't know when she's going to find out, but I know that very soon she's probably going to find out, and it's going to be something that Barry really doesn't want to tell her about, but he's going to have to, and that's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. Barry and Henry, I really hope that we see more of Henry again, because it's always great to see Henry back. I hope they do more with him. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing Henry again. It's great to see him. Iris and Wally, how is she going to handle this? Because we know that she's probably going to meet up Wally. Here's what I'm thinking, guys. Remember how in the last crossover, Arrow, Oliver met face-to-face with the woman of his son, where he found out that his son was alive. Remember that? Now, again, I'm not going to say that, of course they never reintroduced that storyline. That never really meant to be anything that big, but I feel like that's what they're going to do. Since they did that with Oliver last year, I feel like they should do that with Iris this year. That Iris meets up with Wally in the crossover. That's going to be interesting to see what happens there, especially because now they brought it back. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle that, because I really love the way they're handling Wally West. And if you guys don't know, Wally West is going to be a main character, so I'm looking forward to really seeing how they handle all that. That's going to be interesting. But like I said, guys, The Flash is unfortunately taking a break because of the fact that it is going to be Thanksgiving next week, and they're taking a break. They didn't take a break last year, but they're taking a break this year. So Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. won't be on next week either, but like I said, Scream Queens will. But overall, guys, I absolutely love this episode. This was a really great episode. Definitely one of the strongest of the season by far. I really loved everything going on this episode. Really great one, I have to say. Is everyone going to believe Cisco that obviously with Hawkgirl, obviously they know his visions, but what about Caitlin? Let's see. We're going to see what happens. That's going to be interesting as well. But let me know if you guys saw this episode. Like I said, I really loved it. One of the best of the season by far. And I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for Homeland. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.